The irony wasn't lost on me. There I was, Miranda Kelly, the woman who once laughed in the face of death at 200 miles per hour, now frozen in terror watching a TV screen. My trembling fingers clutched a half-empty whiskey glass as her voice filled the grimy bar. And what an incredible finish by Washington in the Knoxville 400. The kind of masterful cornering we haven't seen since Miranda Kelly's championship days. Her voice. Sarah Baker's voice. The same voice that had whispered Italian phrases against my neck under Mediterranean stars 5 years ago. The same voice now narrating races I should still be winning. Another round. I muttered to the bartender, pushing my glass forward as rain hammered against the windows. The storm outside had nothing on the one raging inside me. "You sure about that, champ?" he asked, eyeing me with that mix of reverence and pity I'd grown to despise since my retirement. "Don't call me that." The words came out sharper than intended. That woman's not me anymore. The TV camera panned to Sarah in the commentary box, blonde hair catching the stadium lights, green eyes animated with the thrill of the race. She looked exactly the same, yet entirely different from the woman I'd known during those 3 whirlwind weeks in earthquake-ravaged Tuscany. My phone buzzed. A text from my physical therapist. "Missed appointment. Again. We can't rebuild what you won't show up for." I slid the phone away, the scars along my right arm tingling with phantom pain. The crash that ended my career had broken more than just my body. It had robbed me of my identity, leaving me a ghost haunting the periphery of the racing world I once dominated. "She's good." The bartender nodded toward Sarah on screen. "Knows her stuff." "She should." I drained my glass. "She learned from the best." He raised an eyebrow. "You know her?" The question hung in the air, as I remembered Sarah's hands steadying mine as we lifted rubble from collapsed homes. How we'd argued passionately about engine specifications while distributing water to survivors. How her lips had tasted of cheap wine and expensive dreams the night before I flew home. Not anymore. The camera lingered on Sarah's face as she laughed at something her CO commentator said. The small scar above her left eyebrow, from diving into the Mediterranean at midnight, was barely visible beneath her makeup. I glanced down at my own hands. Once steady enough to thread a car through impossible gaps at mind-bending speeds, now they betrayed me with their constant tremor. "Last call," the bartender announced, mercifully turning off the TV. As I stepped into the rain-soaked parking lot, the cold drops stinging my face, I wondered if Sarah ever thought about those stolen moments between disaster relief shifts. If she remembered watching me race in Monaco the following season, our eyes meeting briefly across the paddock before I turned away, too afraid of what I might do if I let her close again. The key to my modest apartment felt foreign in my hand. Inside, racing trophies gathered dust while unopened physical therapy exercises littered my coffee table. On the wall hung a single-framed photograph, not of my championship win, but of an Italian sunset, taken by hands steadier than mine had been in years. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "Hello, Miranda. This is Channel 8 Sports. We'd like to offer you a guest commentary position alongside Sarah Baker for next month's Grand Prix." I stood paralyzed, rainwater pooling at my feet as the universe played its cruelest joke yet. "Miranda? Are you there?" "Yes." My voice sounded like someone else's. "I'm here." What the producer couldn't see, what Sarah would never know, was the unopened letter in my desk drawer. Her handwriting, her words, her heart, delivered the day after the crash that changed everything. I'd never had the courage to read what might have been. 2 weeks after that fateful phone call, I still hadn't given Channel 8 my answer. The thought of sitting next to Sarah, breathing the same air, pretending we were just colleagues, it was too much. I needed distraction, which is why I'd taken to dawn runs with Turbo, my German shepherd who understood silence better than most humans. "Come on, buddy," I whispered, clipping his leash as the first hints of daylight filtered through my blinds. Turbo had been my one constant since Italy. We'd found him half-starved under a collapsed barn, his back leg injured but his spirit unbroken. The rescue coordinator had insisted I take him home. "You two are cut from the same cloth," she'd said. What she didn't mention was that Sarah had been the one who spotted him first. The morning air carried October's crispness as we hit our usual trail. My lungs burned pleasantly, momentarily replacing thoughts of Sarah with simple physical sensations. Turbo ran ahead, his powerful stride showing no hint of his past injury. Neither of us heard the thunder until it was directly overhead. The boom cracked the sky like an engine backfiring. Turbo froze, then bolted. "Turbo, stop!" I sprinted after him, but the leash had slipped from my hand. Another thunderclap, and he vanished into the wooded area bordering the park. My heart hammered as rain began pelting down, washing away any scent trail he might follow home. For 3 hours I searched, soaked to the bone, calling his name until my voice grew hoarse. By afternoon, I'd plastered missing posters across 5 neighborhoods. My hands trembled worse than usual as I taped his photo to lampposts and store windows. "That's a beautiful dog," said an elderly shopkeeper, watching me struggle with wet tape. "German Shepherd?" "Yes." I swallowed hard. He's everything." The man smiled kindly. "Dogs like that find their way home. They're smarter than most people I know." But as dusk fell with no sign of Turbo, panic set in. I'd lost my career, my purpose, and now the only living being who didn't look at me with pity. Back home, I paced my empty apartment, stopping occasionally to stare out the window at the relentless rain. The silence was deafening. No click-clack of nails on hardwood, no soft snoring from his bed in the corner. The bottle of whiskey beckoned from the counter. Instead, I forced myself to make more posters, this time with a reward. Tomorrow I'd expand my search radius, call animal shelters, hire professional pet finders if necessary. Sleep was impossible, so I worked through the night, my eyes burning as I typed and printed. Dawn broke gray and miserable. I trudged downtown toward the racing district. Turbo loved the scents there, the rubber and fuel that reminded him of our weekend drives. The streets were nearly empty as I stapled posters to every available surface. Outside KSM Racing headquarters, my former team's building, I hesitated. I hadn't been here since the accident. My hands shook violently as I approached the bulletin board near their entrance. That's when I saw it, a glossy brochure for their charity gala next week. And there, smiling professionally in the corner, Sarah Baker, listed as the event's MC. Something twisted in my chest as I pinned Turbo's face beside her printed one. The juxtaposition felt like the universe mocking me. I didn't realize I was crying until a droplet splashed onto the poster, blurring my phone number. Everything I loved somehow connected back to her. Racing, Turbo, even this damned city. I'd spent 5 years building walls only to have them crumble over a missing dog and a chance at redemption I wasn't sure I deserved. My phone buzzed in my pocket with a text from an unknown number. "Call me." If I'd known then that Sarah was already holding my missing piece, that she'd recognized Turbo instantly from a poster fluttering in the morning breeze, perhaps I would have answered differently. Instead, I silenced my phone and continued my solitary search, unaware that my past and future were converging without my permission. The knock came at dusk, just as I was preparing to head out for another desperate search. 3 sharp raps that sent my heart racing with irrational hope. When I wrenched open the door, the world tilted on its axis. There stood Sarah Baker, golden hair dampened by evening mist, holding Turbo's leash in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. "I believe this gentleman belongs to you," she said, her voice exactly as I remembered, slightly husky, tinged with that hint of Massachusetts accent she could never quite shake. Turbo lunged forward, nearly knocking me over as he covered my face with frantic licks. I dropped to my knees, burying my face in his fur to hide the tears threatening to spill. He smelled of unfamiliar shampoo and Sarah's signature perfume, bergamot, and something woodsy I'd never been able to identify. "Where did you find him?" I managed, still not looking up. "About 6 blocks from KSM headquarters. He was sheltering under the awning of that little Italian cafe. Seems he has good taste." A pause. Like his owner. When I finally stood, her green eyes caught mine in that same magnetic pull I remembered from all those years ago. Neither of us moved, the 5 feet between us charged with unsaid things. "You dyed your hair." She broke the silence, gesturing to my fiery red locks. "You didn't." My voice sounded strained even to my own ears. Turbo, sensing the tension, pushed his head against Sarah's palm, the traitor. She laughed, that same laugh that had echoed through Tuscan ruins and haunted my dreams. "May I come in? Unless you'd prefer standing in your doorway all evening." My apartment suddenly seemed shabby and small, racing magazines scattered across the coffee table, dirty dishes in the sink, a life half-lived evident in every corner. But I stepped aside, allowing her to enter my sanctuary with all the grace of someone who belonged there. Nice place. She wandered to the wall of trophies I rarely looked at anymore, though I expected something more, grandiose from racing royalty. Turns out there's not much demand for washed-up drivers with tremor issues. Her expression softened. Is that what you think you are? I shrugged, busying myself with finding glasses for the wine she'd brought. You haven't answered my calls from Channel 8. I've been busy looking for my dog. I placed 2 glasses on the counter with more force than necessary. Who apparently decided to run straight to you. I recognized him from your poster. She uncorked the wine, a Tuscan red, of course. The universe has a strange sense of humor. Turbo settled between us as we sat at my small kitchen table, his head resting on Sarah's foot as though they were old friends. The awkwardness was punctuated by the clink of glasses and careful sips. How have you been, Miranda? Really? Her fingers brushed mine as she reached for the sugar bowl to add to her wine, an Italian habit I'd once teased her about. The simple touch sent electricity through me. Our eyes locked, and suddenly we were back in that field hospital in Tuscany, stealing moments between emergency shifts, the air heavy with possibility and the forbidden thrill of finding joy amid devastation. I've been. The lie died on my lips. I've been drowning. You? Talking about races I wish you were still in. She didn't look away. Wondering if you ever think about Italy. My hand trembled, wine threatening to spill. Without comment, she steadied it with her own. Every damn day, I whispered. Something changed in her gaze, a softening, a certainty. She leaned forward, her breath warm against my lips. I found your dog, Miranda. Now I'm wondering if I might find you too. When her lips met mine, tasting of Tuscan wine and second chances, Turbo gave a soft whine of approval. 5 years dissolved in that moment. The accident, the separation, the silence. All of it burned away in the gentle pressure of her mouth against mine. What I didn't tell her as we broke apart, both breathless, was how close I'd come to reading her letter the night before, how finding Turbo might have saved more than just my dog. That would come later. For now, I simply poured more wine and prepared to learn the woman I'd never forgotten all over again. 3 days after our unexpected reunion, I found myself leading Sarah through the side door of my garage, the one place I'd allowed myself to preserve without apology. Her sharp intake of breath as I flipped on the lights told me everything. Miranda, this is. She wandered between my collection, racing suits encased in glass, helmets from various seasons, the twisted steering wheel from my championship car. This is magnificent. I shrugged, watching her fingers hover reverently over memorabilia that most racing museums would kill to display. It's just stuff. No. She turned, backlit by spotlights illuminating my Monaco trophy. It's your legacy. The word made me flinch. Legacy implied something finished, completed. I wasn't ready for that finality, even after 5 years. How did you do it? I asked, changing the subject as I settled onto the worn leather couch tucked in the corner. Break into sports commentary? It's not exactly a field known for welcoming women. Sarah laughed, perching beside me, closer than strictly necessary. By being twice as prepared and half as apologetic as every man in the room, her smile turned wistful. And by studying the best. I watched every one of your post-race interviews, you know. That explains your expertise on compression rates. I bumped her shoulder with mine. I always wondered how a literature major became so mechanical. I had motivation. Her eyes held mine, steady and sure. I followed your career religiously after Italy, every race, every qualification round. I was in Monaco, you know. The revelation hit like a physical blow. You were there? When I won? And in Sao Paulo when you crashed. The air between us thickened. We never spoke of the crash, not directly. It hung between us like a specter, the dividing line between before and after. Why didn't you? Visit you in the hospital? She looked down at her hands. I tried, 3 times. Your team manager said you weren't accepting visitors. On the 4th attempt, I left the letter instead. The unread letter still sat in my desk drawer, corners worn from being handled but seal intact. Something about breaking it had felt like surrendering to the end of my racing career, admitting that there would be an after. I would have let you in, I said quietly. She nodded, understanding passing between us without words. Outside, rain began pattering against the garage roof, a gentle percussion growing steadily more insistent. "I should probably go before this gets worse," she murmured, making no move to leave. Instead, she stood and moved deeper into my sanctuary, stopping before a wall of photographs. Her finger traced the outline of us in Italy. Volunteers covered in dust, arms slung around each other's shoulders as we celebrated extracting a family from rubble. "You kept this." I joined her, close enough to smell her perfume. Some memories are worth preserving. The rain intensified, drumming against the metal roof with increasing urgency. Sarah turned, her back against the wall of memories, eyes reflecting the soft gallery lighting. "Looks like I'm trapped here." Her voice had dropped an octave, sending shivers across my skin. "Any suggestions on how to pass the time?" I stepped closer, heartbeat thundering louder than the storm. "I could show you the car I'm rebuilding. Or..." Her gaze dropped to my lips. "Or I could finally tell you what I should have said in Italy." My hand found hers, our fingers intertwining as naturally as they had years ago. The tremor in my right hand steadied at her touch, a phenomenon I'd analyze later. "I've missed you," I whispered, the confession ripped from somewhere deep and untouched. "Every race, every commentary, every damn day." Her free hand slid up my arm, over my shoulder, coming to rest at the nape of my neck. "Then stop missing me." When our lips met this time, there was nothing gentle about it. 5 years of longing crashed through the careful walls I'd built, her body pressing mine against the hood of a half-restored Aston Martin. Her hands tangled in my hair as mine discovered the curve of her waist, the warmth of skin beneath cotton. Hours later, breathing heavily on the leather couch, Sarah's head resting on my chest, I watched lightning illuminate the garage in brief flashes. The storm had nowhere near the intensity of what had just transpired between us. "Stay," I murmured against her hair. "Not just tonight." She propped herself up to meet my gaze, her touch trailing over the surgical scars on my arm with reverent fingers. "I'm not going anywhere, Kelly. I've spent 5 years following you from a distance. I'm done with that particular race." The thunder rolled like applause as I pulled her back to me, thinking that some finishes were really just better beginnings. And joining me today in the commentary box is someone who needs no introduction, 5-time champion Miranda Kelly. The production assistant counted down silently with her fingers. 3, 2, 1. "Thanks, Sarah." My voice sounded foreign through the headset, too controlled. "Great to be here." "Great to be here?" I mentally kicked myself for the banality. 3 weeks of waking up next to Sarah, of rediscovering each other. And suddenly I was reduced to generic pleasantries under the studio lights. "Miranda brings unparalleled insight into today's qualification rounds," Sarah continued smoothly, professional as ever despite her foot secretly nudging mine beneath the desk, particularly with Hamilton's adjustment to the new suspension regulations. The red light blinked on the camera, and just like that, we were live to millions. Sarah's transformation was subtle but complete. Her voice took on that authoritative cadence her fans adored. Her posture straightened imperceptibly. The woman who had whispered poetry against my skin this morning was temporarily replaced by Sarah Baker, motorsport analyst extraordinaire. I fell into it more easily than expected, muscle memory from hundreds of post-race interviews guiding me through technical analyses. By the second segment, we had established a rhythm, Sarah setting up questions I could knock out of the park, me occasionally teasing her about her past predictions. The producer's voice in our earpieces sounded pleased. "Great chemistry, folks. Keep it up." If only he knew. During the commercial break, Sarah squeezed my hand under the desk. "You're a natural. Sure you want to stay behind that garage door forever?" Before I could answer, the studio door swung open, and in walked Jim Preston, former driver turned commentator whose technical knowledge was as limited as his opinions were loud. Well, well, the great Miranda Kelly gracing us with her presence. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Thought you'd retired to obscurity after that spectacular wipeout in Sao Paulo?" Sarah's posture stiffened beside me. "Jim, I see production forgot to mention you'd be joining the third segment. Last-minute decision." He settled into a chair on my other side, too close for comfort. "Thought the audience might appreciate some perspective from someone who left the sport with dignity intact." The jab stung more than I wanted to admit. Under the desk, Sarah's hand found my knee, steadying. 30 seconds, called the producer. "Jim," I said quietly, "my dignity is just fine. but your understanding of corner approach speeds has always been questionable at best." His face flushed as the red light blinked on. The segment started smoothly enough, with Sarah moderating between us. But when the current champion's qualifying lap appeared on screen, Preston couldn't help himself. "Classic overcorrection in turn 7, he announced with authority. Something Kelly used to struggle with as well. I opened my mouth to respond, but Sarah beat me to it. "Actually, Jim, if you look at the telemetry data," she pulled up technical graphics with practiced ease, "that's a deliberate weight transfer technique that Miranda pioneered at Monaco in 2016. Most commentators miss it because it happens at microsecond intervals." She smiled sweetly. But then again, most commentators weren't paying attention to the right metrics. The studio fell silent. Preston's face cycled through various shades of red. "Miranda," Sarah continued smoothly, "perhaps you could explain to our audience how that technique affects tire temperature through the next chicane." I bit back a smile and launched into an explanation, watching Preston deflate with each technical term I deployed. By segment's end, he barely contributed a word. As we wrapped, the producer was already in our ears. "Social media's blowing up. You two are trending. We need to make this a regular feature." In the green room afterward, Sarah scrolled through Twitter on her phone, grinning. "Look at this. Racing's power couple dominates commentary box. And here's another. Kelly and Baker should replace the regular team permanently." "Power couple?" I raised an eyebrow. She showed me a compilation someone had already made, moments of us exchanging glances, finishing each other's sentences, my hand briefly touching her shoulder during a particularly exciting qualifying lap. "The internet sees what it wants to see," she said, but her expression was concerned. "Is this okay? Us being linked publicly?" I considered this. For years after my accident, I'd avoided publicity of any kind, withdrawing so completely some racing publications ran, "Whatever happened to Miranda Kelly" features. I said slowly, "I'm more worried about being known as a commentator than being known as your girlfriend." Sarah's green eyes widened. "Girlfriend?" The word had slipped out unplanned, hanging between us like a challenge flag on the track. "Unless that's moving too fast?" I hedged. Her answer came as a kiss, brief but firm, right there in the KSM Studios green room where anyone might walk in. Not nearly fast enough for someone who used to take corners at 190 miles per hour. Outside, camera phones captured us leaving together, Sarah's hand confidently in mine. By morning, we wouldn't be racing's worst-kept secret anymore. "You never talk about it." Sarah's voice was gentle in the darkness of my bedroom, her fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. 2 months into our relationship, and we'd settled into a rhythm as natural as breathing. About what? I knew perfectly well what she meant. The crash. She propped herself up on one elbow, moonlight catching in her blonde hair. I've watched the footage 100 times, read every analysis. But I've never heard your version. My body tensed involuntarily. Outside, thunder rumbled, the first storm since the night Turbo had run away and inadvertently brought Sarah back into my life. There's nothing to tell. Hydraulics failed, car hit the wall at 162 miles per hour. Physics did the rest. Sarah's hand found mine under the covers, thumb brushing across my knuckles. "That's the official report. I'm asking what you remember." No one had ever asked that before. Not the doctors, not my team, not the sports journalists who hounded me for exclusive interviews during my recovery. They all wanted technical details, someone to blame, rehabilitation timelines. No one wanted the nightmares that came with the truth. "I remember everything," I whispered. "Every fraction of a second." Sarah waited, patient and still beside me. Lightning briefly illuminated the room, followed by another low growl of thunder. I knew something was wrong 3 turns before it happened. The words felt rusty, unused. There was this hesitation in the steering, microseconds. Nothing on the telemetry. I radioed in but kept driving. Her hand tightened around mine. 230 miles per hour down the straight. I remember thinking the clouds looked strange, unnaturally gray. Then into the S-curves and, my voice caught. The wheel just, dead in my hands, no resistance, no control. The rain started then, pattering against the windows, nature's percussion to my horror story. They say I hit the wall at 162, but it felt like slow motion. I remembered the sound, not the impact, but this strange whooshing as the air got forced from my lungs. I remember thinking, this is how it ends, and feeling disappointed. Disappointed? Sarah's voice was barely audible over the increasing rainfall. That I'd never see Italy again, never see you again. Her intake of breath was sharp. You thought about me? During the crash? Strange, isn't it? Brain choosing its most important memories in what it thinks are its final moments. I tried for lightness, but my voice shook. What happened next? Her fingers brushed tears I hadn't realized were falling. Fire. The heat was. I shuddered. They tell me I was conscious through extraction, fighting the medics. I don't remember that part. Something seemed to break inside me then, a dam I'd carefully maintained for 5 years. My breath came in gasps, my hands trembling violently as the memories crashed through. The hospital ceiling, the diagnosis, the realization my career was over, the phantom pain that still woke me some nights. Without a word, Sarah pulled me against her chest, arms wrapping around me like safety barriers. She didn't offer platitudes or solutions, just the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against my ear as I shattered and reformed. The letter, I managed between ragged breaths. Your letter. I never read it. I know, she whispered into my hair. You would have replied if you had. The storm outside reached its crescendo as my panic slowly subsided, leaving me drained but somehow lighter. Sarah's lips pressed against my forehead, my temple, the corner of my mouth, as if mapping a safe course home. I'm sorry, I mumbled against her collarbone. For what? Being human. For disappearing, for not reading your letter, for wasting 5 years we could have had. Her hand tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet her gaze in the storm-flickered darkness. We're here now. That's what matters. When her lips found mine, the kiss tasted of salt and absolution. My hands steadied as they tangled in her hair, the tremor temporarily quieted by her touch. Morning found us still entwined, the storm passed, sunlight streaming through half-closed blinds. Sarah's phone buzzed with messages. Her producer, no doubt, wondering where their star commentator was. Stay, I murmured, not opening my eyes. Always, she promised, settling back against me as Turbo jumped onto the bed, completing our unlikely family circle. What I didn't tell her then was how her simple presence had done what years of physical therapy couldn't, given me a glimpse of who I might become, instead of who I'd been. The charity gala for KSM Racing's youth development program was exactly the sort of event I'd avoided since my accident. Crystal champagne flutes, tuxedoed investors, and worst of all, pity wrapped in politeness. Yet here I was, adjusting my emerald gown in the bathroom mirror, while Sarah waited in our hotel suite. You look stunning, she said when I emerged, her eyes traveling appreciatively from my swept-up red hair to the slit revealing my right leg, scars and all. Ready to scandalize the racing establishment? I laughed despite my nerves. By existing? Or by being your date? Both. She kissed me lightly, careful not to smudge either of our lipstick, though mostly by showing them what they lost when they pushed you out. 4 months into our relationship, Sarah's faith in me still felt undeserved but increasingly necessary. Her commentary career had soared after our joint broadcast went viral. 3 networks now competed for her contract renewal. Meanwhile, I'd started accepting limited consulting work with independent teams, my expertise valued even if my driving days were done. The ballroom glittered with Knoxville's racing elite when we arrived. Conversations paused as heads turned, tracking our entrance. Sarah's hand tightened reassuringly around mine. Miranda Kelly, a familiar voice cut through the momentary silence. The prodigal champion returns. Danielle Washington stood before us, champagne in hand, smile razor sharp. We'd been teammates for 2 seasons before her aggressive driving style and equally aggressive personality made working together impossible. Now, apparently, she'd traded her racing suit for designer dresses. Danielle, I kept my voice neutral. You look well. Better than well. Her eyes flicked dismissively to Sarah before returning to me. I've moved to the business side of things, more lucrative, less chance of being incinerated. Sarah's posture stiffened beside me. I squeezed her hand in a silent plea for patience. Congratulations, I said. Always knew you were better at talking than driving. Danielle's smile didn't falter, but something dangerous flashed in her eyes. Speaking of talking, I caught your commentary debut, Miranda. Quite a pivot from champion to sidekick. Before I could respond, Sarah stepped forward. She provided more technical insight in 10 minutes than most commentators manage in a career. I'm sure she did. Danielle's gaze lingered on our joined hands. Always nice to have personal supporters, though I wonder if the network knows about your arrangement. Our arrangement? Sarah's voice dropped dangerously low. Oh, please. Danielle sipped her champagne. The racing world has always been full of convenient partnerships. I just wonder which of you is using whom. My free hand clenched, the old competitive fire flaring. If you have something to say, Washington. Ladies, there you are, the KSM team principal interrupted, oblivious to the tension. Miranda, we've missed you around the garage. Danielle here has just made us an extraordinary offer. Danielle's smile widened. I was saving the announcement for the formal dinner, but since Miranda's here, I've acquired majority ownership of KSM Racing. The revelation hit like a crash barrier at full speed. KSM, my former team, the garage that still felt like home despite everything. Richard didn't mention he was selling, I managed, naming the founder who'd discovered me in amateur circuits. Heart attack last month. Danielle's voice held mock sympathy. His kids wanted quick cash rather than legacy. I'm offering both. The team principal cleared his throat awkwardly. Danielle has exciting plans for expansion, including, he turned to me, a management position for you, Miranda, head of driver development. Sarah's intake of breath was sharp beside me. I kept my expression carefully controlled. I don't recall applying. Consider it a standing offer. Danielle placed her empty glass on a passing tray. Though it comes with conditions. We need KSM's image rehabilitated, not complicated. Your technical expertise without the personal baggage. Her gaze flicked meaningfully toward Sarah. You're asking me to choose between my relationship and a job? The words tasted bitter. I'm asking you to be professional. The choice is yours. She turned to Sarah with artificial warmth. Nothing personal, darling, just business. As Danielle glided away to work the room, Sarah turned to me, her expression carefully neutral. You should consider it. It's your team, your home. It's a manipulation and you know it. It's also an opportunity. Sarah's voice was tight. One that might not come again. Later in our hotel room, the argument erupted properly. Sarah insisting I shouldn't reject the offer on her account. Me furious she would even consider Danielle's ultimatum valid. This isn't about us, Sarah paced, still in her gown. This is about your recovery, your purpose. My purpose isn't being Danielle Washington's token ex-champion. Then what is it? Commentary appearances every few months? Hiding in your garage? Her words stung with truth. You're more than what happened to you, Miranda. I stared at her, suddenly exhausted. I need time to think. The silence between us stretched, taut, and dangerous. Take all the time you need. Sarah grabbed her overnight bag. Just don't use me as your excuse. The door closed behind her with devastating quietness. In the sudden stillness, I realized with terrible clarity that I'd never actually read her letter. 3 days after our fight, I retreated to my mountain cabin outside Knoxville, a place I'd purchased after the accident but rarely visited. The isolation I'd once feared now felt necessary, a quiet space to untangle the mess I'd made of my second chance with Sarah. Turbo paced restlessly at first, sniffing corners and whining at the door, clearly missing Sarah as much as I did. By the second day, he'd settled into resignation, watching me with accusatory brown eyes as I stared at my phone. No calls, no texts, no indication Sarah was as miserable as I was. Rain pattered against the cabin roof on the third evening, as I finally worked up the courage to do what I should have done 5 years ago. The letter was creased and worn at the edges from being handled but never opened. Sarah's neat handwriting on the envelope faded but still legible. My hands trembled worse than usual as I broke the seal. Miranda, they tell me you're awake but not accepting visitors. I understand. I've seen how you retreat when wounded, like in Tuscany when that building collapsed just after we'd cleared it. You disappeared for 2 days then too. I'm writing because what happens next matters too much to leave to assumption. I was there in Sao Paulo, watching from the media section when your car hit the wall. In that moment, I realized something I've suspected since Italy. I love you. Not the champion, not the racing icon. You. The woman who rescued stray dogs and argued passionately about engine torque over cheap wine. Recovery will be hard. The doctors were clear about that. But if there's any chance you feel what I feel, I want to walk that road with you. Not out of pity or obligation, but because lives are short and I've wasted too much time already. I'll be in Knoxville next month for the racing series. Find me if you want to start again. If not, know that you are loved exactly as you are, not as the world wanted you to be. Always yours. Sarah. I read it 3 times, each word a blow to my carefully constructed defenses. 5 years lost to fear and pride. 5 years Sarah had waited, building her career while keeping track of mine from afar. And now, I'd pushed her away again. The cabin phone rang, startling me. Few people had this number. Hello? Miranda. The team principal's voice was hesitant. I hope I'm not interrupting. Danielle asked me to follow up on her offer. The board meets tomorrow. I looked at Sarah's letter, then at the rain-streaked window reflecting my own divided expression. Tell Danielle I have a counter-proposal, one she won't want to miss. I spent the night outlining my terms, fueled by a clarity I hadn't felt since before the accident. By morning I had a plan, risky, potentially ruinous, but mine. When Danielle called directly sounding smug, I laid it out without preamble. I'll take the position under 3 conditions. First, full autonomy over the development program. Second, a driver academy for women and minorities with actual funding, not just PR promises. Third, no restrictions on my personal life. Her laugh was cold. Bold demands from someone whose career ended in flames. Bold is the only thing that wins races. You taught me that. A long pause. The board won't approve that budget. They will when Sarah Baker's exclusive coverage brings in new sponsors. You're overestimating her influence. And you're underestimating how much I learned about the business while everyone thought I was hiding. Your financing is leveraged against future wins. I can make them happen, but only on my terms. The negotiation continued for an hour, each concession from Danielle a small victory. By the end, I had most of what I wanted, except the one thing that truly mattered. I drove back to Knoxville through sheets of rain, turbo-anxious in the passenger seat. The storm intensified as I approached the city limits, visibility reduced to mere feet ahead. Appropriate metaphor, I thought grimly. Sarah's apartment building loomed through the downpour. I parked haphazardly, not caring about potential tickets. The doorman recognized me, his eyebrows raising in surprise as I stood dripping in the lobby. Ms. Baker isn't accepting visitors, he said, apologetic but firm. Tell her it's about the letter. I pushed soaked hair from my face. Please. Minutes stretched like hours as I waited, leaving puddles on the marble floor. When the elevator doors finally opened, my heart lurched painfully. Sarah stood there in sweatpants and an oversized racing team shirt. My shirt, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep or tears, or both. You read it. Not a question. I should have read it 5 years ago. My voice cracked. I'm sorry it took me so long to find my way back to you. She stayed in the elevator, holding the door open but keeping distance between us. And Danielle's offer? I rewrote it, on my terms. Our terms. The smallest hint of a smile touched her lips. Always negotiating. Not about you. I closed the distance between us, heedless of my dripping clothes. Never about you. When I reached for her, she came willingly, her body colliding with mine like we were 2 parts of a whole finally reconnected. Her lips tasted of coffee and forgiveness, her hands certain as they tangled in my wet hair. Don't disappear again, she whispered against my mouth. I made a promise then I intended to keep for the rest of my life. 6 months can change everything. The autumn chill had given way to spring warmth, bringing with it a rebirth that seemed fitting for the transformation in my life. The Miranda Kelly Racing Academy for Underrepresented Drivers occupied what was once KSM's secondary testing facility, now expanded, modernized, and buzzing with promise. Ms. Kelly. A young woman in her early 20s jogged up as I inspected the newly installed simulator room. I applied the adjustments to the pedal configuration like you suggested. Shaved 2 seconds off my lap time. I smiled, recognizing the hunger in her eyes, the same fire I'd once had. Good, now find another second. Champions aren't satisfied with good enough. Yes, ma'am. She practically vibrated with determination as she returned to the simulator. 10 students in our first cohort, all women from backgrounds rarely represented in motorsport. 5 had already secured testing roles with development teams. Danielle had fought me on every budget allocation, but even she couldn't argue with results or the positive press Sarah's exclusive coverage had generated. Speaking of Sarah, she'd thrown herself into documenting the Academy's progress while juggling her regular commentary duties. Her special report on female drivers had won a sports journalism award and brought sponsors flooding in. What had begun as my personal redemption project had evolved into something far more significant than either of us had imagined. "There's my champion." Sarah's voice pulled me from my thoughts. She stood in the doorway, casual in jeans and the Academy's team jacket, a leash in her hand. Someone was missing his afternoon walk. Turbo bounded toward me, his enthusiasm undiminished by the gray now frosting his muzzle. Behind him trotted a smaller, younger shepherd mix, Velocity, the rescue we'd adopted together 3 months earlier. I lost track of time. I knelt to greet both dogs, accepting their enthusiastic kisses. The new aerodynamics package arrived. Sarah's indulgent smile told me she understood completely. "Dinner at 7? I have that interview with racing today at 5, but I should be done by then. It's a date." I straightened, watching her cheeks color slightly at my deliberate choice of words. Even after months together, the simplest acknowledgments of our relationship could make her blush. After they departed, I returned to my office, once the domain of race engineers, now converted to a space that felt truly mine. Photos lined the walls, my championship wins, yes, but also newer memories. Sarah and me at the Academy opening, our impromptu vacation to Italy, revisiting the town where we'd first met. The students gathered around a cake celebrating our first competition win. My phone buzzed with a message from Danielle. "Board meeting tomorrow. Bring the Q2 projections. Try not to be disgustingly happy about exceeding targets." I smiled. Our relationship had evolved into something resembling mutual respect, if not quite friendship. Her business acumen combined with my technical expertise had KSM Racing climbing the constructor standings again. At sunset, I drove my vintage convertible, the one car I'd kept from my racing days, toward the overlook that provided a panoramic view of Knoxville. Sarah was already waiting, perched on the hood of her own car, dictating notes into her phone. "Rap segment with quote from Kelly about perseverance in male-dominated," she stopped, smiling as I approached. "Just finishing up." I settled beside her, our shoulders touching as we watched the city lights blink to life below us. "I had a call from Monaco today," she said after a comfortable silence. "They're honoring the 10th anniversary of your championship win next month. Want you as guest of honor." The familiar tightness in my chest whenever my old life was mentioned had faded to a manageable pang. "What did you tell them?" "That you'd think about it." Her hand found mine. "But I booked the tickets anyway." I laughed, squeezing her fingers. "Presumptuous. Confident." She turned to face me. "There's something else. They want us both, me to cover it, you to be covered. A professional power couple feature. And you're okay with that, being that public about us?" Sarah's eyes held mine steadily. "I spent 5 years watching you from a distance. I'm done with hiding." The moment expanded between us, filled with possibility. I reached into my jacket pocket, fingers closing around the small velvet box I'd been carrying for weeks. "Since we're discussing Monaco." I slid off the hood, knee touching the gravel as I looked up at her stunned expression. "I was thinking we might have another reason to celebrate while we're there." Her hand covered her mouth as I opened the box, revealing the emerald ring that matched her eyes. "Sarah Baker, will you marry me at the same finish line where you first watched me win?" Tears spilled onto her cheeks as she nodded, pulling me up to crush her lips against mine. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, she whispered against my mouth, "I think we both win this one." As I slid the ring onto her finger, I realized the finish line I'd once thought had ended my life had merely been the starting grid for something far more precious. A race with no trophies but infinitely greater rewards, with the woman who'd brought me home when I was most lost.